Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about you as a dungeon master and what you have the right to say to a player as an IRL person, you as a dungeon master are an IRL person, and what you have the right to say to them as a non-player character, because you are this voice of every NPC in Dungeons & Dragons, right? So let's get into this. This is really fascinating. Okay, so first of all, in this content, I'm going to talk about the 2022 movie Tar, okay, which is the stars. It's Kate Blanchett's Tar. So Kate Blanchett is the star, and the movie is about a world-class conductor, and the movie has multiple themes, but it's about music and it's about conducting, right? And it's also about power dynamics. It's a really fascinating film, and I'm not even done it. I'm doing in progress. I'm doing view journey commentary, right? And I'm a proponent of this now, right? So I don't think old way, new way, right? Old way, I watched the whole movie and then I tell you my opinion, right? New way, I watch a little bit of the movie and I tell you what I think of the character at that moment in time, in my view, right? Because I'm almost positive that my view of Lydia Tarr is going to change as the story progresses, right? So this is me commenting on what I think of Lydia Tarr and her speech at this point in the project, where I am in the viewing experience, my viewing journey, right? All right, so brilliant movie. I'm loving it. And I would say highly recommended. And I've only watched 30 minutes of it. Okay, all right. So and I'm okay with that. I'm like, again, we live in a different world now. And this is one of the reasons why I roll so hard against the OGLers. By copying, they're clutching to the past, right? The OSR is right in their name, right? They're definitely clutching to the past, right? And the ORC, the Open Role-Playing Game Creatives, they're definitely clutching to the past, right? They're using this incredibly problematic species from Tolkien's work and from Dungeons & Dragons' work, right? And which had massive problems in both. And in my humble opinion, I think they're using ORC to signal that if you have a high amount of prejudice, you're going to be very comfortable under their banner. That's my opinion on it. All right. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's an oversight. I think it's incredibly purposeful. Right. Because everybody who picked that name was very aware of all the Tolkien problems and very aware of all the D&D problems. It was a terrible idea. Okay. All right. Let's keep it moving. All right. So last year, I had a grown $$ woman at the table who came and played 2 sessions with a whole bunch of dudes, right? So I had a physical table, we were playing Dungeons & Dragons, and this grown $$ woman came to play in our game, right? And I'm trying to keep this video short, so I'm not going to talk about how that happened or why she left after two sessions, okay? All right. Now, she's grown, right? So I can't say, okay, little lady, right? It would be totally inappropriate, all right? But I'm going to tell you that I actually think there is someone who could say, okay, little lady, to her with standing. So here's the issue. I, as an IRL person, cannot say, okay, little lady, to this grown woman, right? It's inappropriate, right? And it's gendered, and there's a whole bunch of problems, right? But there is somebody who could say it, right? And I'm not even gonna get into that right now because I want to talk about Tar. So because I'm giving you a little bit like how this would actually happen at the table. I will tell you. So let's say that woman, right? She goes on a trip with her mother and another family, with her family, including her mother, and another family, right? And then she is rude to the other mother in the other family, right? To another woman in the other family. Her mother can say, okay, little lady, right? Just 3 words when they're separated from the group. And it will immediately click back to when she was a little lady and her mother was correcting her correctly, right? And so her mother could say, okay, little lady, to this grown woman and say, you're being rude, right? And with 3 words, she could just say, I'm putting you in a position of correction, right? And just and those 3 words, which would be incredibly dismissive and completely wrong for me to use, become kind, actually, saying, hey, you are being a total jerk. Right? But she could just say, okay, little lady, and it snaps her back to that time when she was a little lady, and her mom would say that genuinely, right? And correcting her, right? Tar has the best example of this that I have ever seen as far as standing and what is allowed to be said as a non-player character, right? And what's allowed to be said as an IRL, right? So get this, all right. So Tar is about Lydia Tar. She is an EGOT. She has an Emmy, a Grammy, a Tony, and an Oscar, right? She's the character played by Cate Blanchett is a world-class conductor, right? So she's teaching a class at an Ivy. They might have mentioned the Ivy in the, so this is like probably Juilliard or Yale or Harvard, right? Blah, 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 right? So she's literally a rich, established world-class conductor, and she's teaching people at a school where they're paying $250,000 at least a year to learn, right? And so now she's in her class, and she tells this pan-gendered POC in her class play Bach on the piano, right? Because she's teaching, right? And she wants to teach something about Bach. And the pan-gendered POC plays some of the music, and I'm guessing that's his, his pronoun. It might have been different in the film. I don't think it was super clear if he identified his pronouns, so I'm just using he there. It may have been a different pronoun. I'm going to move forward. Okay. So he says, hey, he just kind of plunks it out and plays poorly. And she's like, hey, wait. This is an Ivy, man. You can't be just like plunking on the keyboard and not doing nothing, right? Step it up. Where are we at, man? What's happening? Why do you suck right now? Because I shouldn't have to deal with poor playing anywhere, right? And he's like, I don't feel it. I don't feel Bach, right? And he's like, as a pan-gendered POC, I can't be feeling this European Christian white cis male, right? And Lydia Tar says something amazing, all right? Now, first of all, I need to tell you that Lydia Tar has already identified, she is self-described as a U-Haul lesbian, right? I know what a lesbian is. I don't know what a U-Haul lesbian is, right? And I'm never going to know what a U-Haul lesbian is, because I am not going, because like in Dungeons & Dragons reflects the real world. So like, if I'm a Dungeons & Dragons adventurer, I'm not going to roll up on a green dragon by myself, right? That's the same thing with that Google search, right? I don't know what's going to happen to me on the other end of a Google search for U-Haul lesbian. I don't know what list I'm going to get on. I don't know. I'm not going to explain that to my wife. Like some dragons you can't slay, right? Like, so I'm never going to know what a U-Haul lesbian is, because I'm never going to do that Google search, right? Okay, all right. But she is a lesbian, right? So a self-identified U-Haul lesbian, right? So she says to this pan-gendered POC, she says, listen, the problem with enrolling as an ultrasonic, epistemic dissident and dismissing Bach's genius because of his birth country, his religion, his gender, and his gender, is that you can be dismissed in the same way, right? And she's saying you're a conductor, right? Like, and so so basically Lydia Tar says the problem with being an ultrastemic, epistemic dissident, right, and dismissing Bach's genius because of his gender, his birth country, his religion, and his religion, is that you can be dismissed just as easily, right? Fascinating, right? So here's a woman saying, "Hey, you don't get to write this white cis European hetero male. You don't get to write him off. You don't. Period." So she's telling a pan-gendered POC, you don't get to pick, right? I'm your teacher. I'm bringing you to excellence. You don't know nothing, right? You don't know nothing, right? I've forgotten more about music than you ever knew, right? And so Lydia Tar is like, no, you don't get to do this, man. You don't get to do this, period. End of sentence, right? And it is really fascinating. It is really, really fascinating, and so here's the issue, right? If a white hetero male comes in and says says to a pangender POC, you have to study Bach, that person could go right to the, they could go right to the dean and say, I've been oppressed, right? But when a U-Haul lesbian says, no, learn Bach, master Bach, it's not, because she has standing, right? She is a marginalized person. She is both a woman and a woman, and she's a lesbian, two marginalized groups, so she has standing to roll at this marginalized person and say, nope, you don't get to do it, right? Okay, you need to learn, you need to master Bach, right? And I got a cute little line there, but the reality is, I don't care, right? Like, and you're gonna have to master Bach because I'm your teacher and you're the student. That's fascinating, right? And here's where we land. Dungeons and Dragons ain't like anything on the planet, right? Authors and directors, they get months, years, and they get 15 rewrites to get this right. You have 5 seconds, okay? You take on the role of a non-player character, and you got to be quick, right? You got to remember what you as an IRL person could say, and you got to remember what you can say as an NPC, because some NPCs have different standing. And when you realize that, and when you realize that the Dungeon Master does more in a day, right, and is under much tighter constraints than an author would ever be, or much tighter constraints than a director would ever be, you realize we are the future of this planet. We are doing something that directors and authors can't do. They're not called to do it. We are the emotional, intellectual, spiritual leaders of this world. And people just don't know it, right? Like, that's the issue, right? And we are discussing pantheons, and we are discussing all these different things. All that's my humble opinion. I'd love to hear yours.